Hey guys, Jim here. Welcome back once again. Today we're going to do something that's a little bit different, something that I've only done a couple times previously, and I discussed each time. I'm not a huge fan of doing this, showcasing my own work, because I kind of feel that it's a bit self-serving, and I really rather dedicate my channel to showcasing other talented makers, the amazing knives they make, and help to grow their business. But I got a special request from the owner of both of these knives. He actually bought both of these knives from me as I finished them, and he really wanted to have an archive of these two, not only for himself but for me as well, because he looks at these as being some of the prettiest, I guess, knives that I've made. So I want to go ahead and break these down very quickly. The Hellraiser model you're pretty familiar with, but I'll still go over it once again. And then, of course, this is my Scaphoid. Now, both of these are from the same billet of Rose Pattern Damascus. Rose Pattern is Damasteel's name for their raindrop style Damascus pattern. A lot of you guys know that I work with a lot of different Damascus and Sanmai, but one of my favorites for the end product is always going to be Damasteel. It is simply the finest Damascus that you can use. They're using PM steels, powder metallurgy steels. You're getting micro clean steel. It's coming out once they're finished with their process, basically in a way that it cannot delaminate, it cannot separate, so you don't have any of those issues that you may have with any other Damascus as you're working with it. In a lot of cases you could be working with a beautiful piece of Damascus and you're about 80% of the way done with the knife when you notice, a cold shut or anything that would cause the layers to delaminate. And while most of the quality Damascus suppliers out there will replace that faulty billet for you, it doesn't replace all the time that you've already put into it, and then the additional time it will take to get the new billet up to where you were at on the previous knife. So by using Damasteel, you're always going to be very safe as a maker when you're using their particular product. It's just absolutely stellar. Another great thing is they will take an absolute true razor edge. They use fantastic steel. As long as it's heat treated properly and the maker works the material properly in prep and in etching, you will get one of the most beautiful materials that you can get your hands on. And I'll discuss the way that I work it and the way that I etch it a little bit later on in the video, but I want to give you guys some close-up looks. What we're looking at here on the Scaphoid is African blackwood. And then that is set up with a dyed and stabilized box elder burl, which gives you these beautiful greens and teals and yellows throughout. Really, really nice material. And then, of course, the liner also is going to be the African blackwood. I'm really super happy with how this came out. I think it looks fantastic. It's a nice combination of exotic or semi-exotic woods that are stabilized. They're not going to warp. They're not going to start coming up off of the tang over time. Nice and tough. It's not going to absorb a lot of garbage as you're actually using it, because it's sealed very, very well. There are a lot of guys that'll work with natural raw woods, and then as you're working it, as you're sanding it, you'll put some oil in it, you'll sand it some more, it'll seep, you'll sand it some more, and then you'll keep reapplying oil. And it's a multi-day process if it's done right. And then at the end, you'll seal it up with the oil again, and then if you choose to buff and polish, that's entirely up to you. With stabilized wood, it's less prone to chip outs and cracking and basically breaking down while you're working with it, because I'm having to drill it, then I'm counterboring it, then obviously all the grinding and cutting that I'm doing, you don't want it to disintegrate or fall apart or chip out or anything, and a stabilized wood is going to be a little bit easier to work with. Yes, you'll pay more for it as a maker in the raw material, but I find that both for working with it, that's worth it, and for the longevity of the material for the customer, it's also worth it. So basically, the Scaphoid is my version of an EDC-sized Tanto. So what you've got is just under 9 inches overall in length, just like the Hellraiser, with a 4-inch blade, just under a 4-inch cutting edge. Yet it's very, very slim and very easy to carry. I always suggest to my customers for almost every knife that I make to go with a horizontal carry on their leather sheath. That way a knife like this, even though it is fairly long, you can simply throw a t-shirt over it and it's completely concealed. I'm not the kind that carries a knife down my leg. It's just not who I am. It's not the kind of person that I am. And that's fine if you are. There's nothing wrong with that. I like anything that I'm carrying, whether it be a gun, knife, whatever, to be completely concealed. So I design my knives for concealment, for ease of carry, where it doesn't feel burdensome to carry the knife, and it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. So we'll give you some more close-ups here on the Scaphoid before I move on to the Hellraiser. For those that don't know, the first several designs that I came up with, I was naming after bone names. Because my last name is Skelton, and my entire life, even now 46 years later, people still misspell and mispronounce it to skeleton. And so I figured that'd be a nice little play on words. So yeah, I did the occipital, the tibia, the scaphoid, all kinds of different bone names until I ran out of good sounding bone names. But this is still part of that series, the scaphoid, which by the way is the bone right in here. So there it is right there. It's very, very, very sharp. I flat grind everything. Every now and then I'll hollow grind, but it's not very often. Now the Damasteel pattern and being mirror polished does somewhat hide the grinds a little bit, but we can highlight it here. You can see the top swedge that goes all the way to the tip. And then there is your primary bevel with the sweeping plunges. And I'll show you where the plunges meet here. And as far as fitment in the hand, on this model, like my tibia and like my occipital, I wanted to go, as for a compact knife, I still wanted to keep a full-size blade. That's why it's a 4-inch blade. So I chose to shorten the handle a little bit so that it was easy to conceal, yet you could still get a full grip on the handle, as you can see here. Somebody with smaller hands than mine would find it even easier. And then I give a nice large finger recess in almost every knife that I make. And I don't know if it really shows up on camera here, but I do round this off right here so that you don't accidentally cut yourself when you're holding the knife. If you were to happen to stab something and it were to shift and push the fat of your finger up, it's not going to get sliced open. So you'll see where the edge starts from the sweeping plunge line. Now we'll take a look at the Hellraiser V2. V2 simply means variant 2. I still kept the finger guard, but what I did was I added a forward finger choil to the V2. I changed the grinds ever so slightly, and the scale shape at the front of the scales is different. I don't do the devil's tail anymore, where the prongs go down the blade. Instead, I do what I call the devil's moon, a crescent moon shape that complements, usually terminates right where the plunge is. There you go, you can see from the grind. That way if you're cutting something and it were to go up that bevel, it's not going to break off the ends of the crescent. As you see, I also do taper them so that there's less of a chance of you snagging them and breaking them off. And what I chose to do on this was actually going to be my personal knife. So I planned this one out from the beginning. As soon as I was cutting this Damasteel bar, I left enough room for a Hellraiser for myself. It kind of has become my signature blade. And I wanted to do something special for the handles. And in the beginning, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And then I got a hold of this beautiful set of African blackwood. What you have here is a stripe in, this is also box elder burl, as a matter of fact. That is a blue dyed and stabilized box elder burl. And I'll talk about the liners here in a second. So I wanted to make something special for myself because the 2 times I have made a knife for myself, they've both been bought out from under me. So I figured Blade Show is coming up in 2.5 months. It's time for me to make a knife for myself that I can carry at the show and show people my knives. Because if everything were to have gone like last year, I pretty much sold out Friday. I had 1 knife left over Saturday morning that I had to sell, and then I had the whole weekend off to run around and screw off. So a lot of people are like, oh, I wanted to see your knives. I didn't get a chance to go by before you sold out. So I wanted to have something that I could carry of my own. So I decided to build this. Now, as I was making this set of scales, I had just finished working on another knife where I was using liners. And I made the mistake and I didn't change the settings on my drill press for the counterboring from the knife that had the 60 thou liners to going back to just scales. So when I did the counterbore, I go to start dry fitting everything to start working the scales. I use, as you see, titanium pivots that are made for folders. Well, when I go to screw them together, they screwed down tight and the scales were still loose. I'm like, oh shit. Well, I guess my knife is going to get liners. And I looked through my pile of liner material, all the G10s and the glow-in-the-darks and all that, and nothing really seemed to work well with the classiness of the Damasteel and the African Blackwood. And I looked over and I saw I still had a sheet of copper. I said, you know what? Hell, you know what? I haven't done a set of liners in copper ever, so let's go ahead and use that. Yeah, you dumbass. I didn't realize just how difficult that was going to be. Working with copper is difficult enough on its own. It grinds differently, it cuts differently, it heats up instantly, the whole thing turns to fire just when you're grinding one end of it. It's just not fun. Now, you're taking that very, very soft material that heats up very, very quickly, and you're trying to match it up where you don't feel any difference in the materials to hardened stainless steel and wood. Now, this is a fairly dense wood. It's not as soft as box elder or maple or anything like that, but it is still very, very dense. So you're trying to get all three of these materials to stay perfectly matched up all the way from the initial rough forming it all the way up to the mirror polish. So everything around the tang is mirror polished. The wood, as you see, is all polished. That's the best way to get the finish out of this wood. The copper had to be mirror polished, and so does Damasteel in order to be properly etched. So I had to go through, so let's see, starting off at 60 grit, 120, 220, 400, 600, 800, 1000, 1200, 2500, and 3000. That's just the belts. Then going back, because you're going to start feeling a difference between the steel, the copper, and the wood. All three are going to be at different heights. Going back, starting again, I think I started probably about 1000 with die maker stones and sandpaper and doing all of that by hand to make sure that all of that matched up. But I didn't mind putting in all that time because it wasn't a knife that I was going to be charging money for. It was for myself. So I spent weeks on this knife throughout the course of working on other knives at the same time, because it didn't really matter. I didn't have to charge for my time. And then COVID-19 reared its ugly head. So as far as I'm concerned, Blade Show ain't gonna happen. This is the end of March as I'm recording this. They still have not announced the cancellation, but the state of Georgia, there's no way they're gonna allow a large congregation like that to take place while we're dealing with this epidemic. So I said, well, I don't really necessarily need to be showing a knife of my own, to carry if I'm quarantined to my house for the next month or 2 months or whatever it's going to be. So I decided to go ahead and make this available, and the gentleman that had already purchased this one decided to get a matching Hellraiser. Let's take a quick look at the Damasteel, and I'll discuss my process on that. You're going to be seeing the next video upload from me will be a Damasteel knife made by someone else. And you're going to notice a stark difference between this and his. The proper way, and some will want to argue this, and that's fine, that's entirely up to you, but the proper way to work with Damasteel is to bring it to a full mirror polish. If you don't, you'll start getting streaks through, see the contrasting steel and black there? You'll start getting streaks and it's going to look smudged. So it has to be not only mirror polish, but a true, flawless, really, really good mirror polish. Now, it takes a tremendous amount of time because that's all done by hand. Yes, when I'm doing the bevels and when I'm doing the top bevels here, the swedges, that's done on the grinder and I stop at 3,000, but I still have to go back by hand. I'll drop back down to 1,200 and then start working it by hand to get all of the belt grinder scratches out. So every part of this entire piece of steel has to be completely mirror polished. That's extraordinarily time consuming. It's rough on your fingers, your wrists, and your back, believe you me. And that's why people charge a lot of money when it comes to working with Damasteel. The raw material is very expensive, and working it, because this is not a lazy man's Damascus, is also very expensive in the time consumed and the materials consumed. You know, going through the die maker stones, going through the sandpaper, going through the belts. You're using a lot of materials just to finish this off. Now, when it comes to etching, you need to use muriatic acid. Now, there are a couple of different ways you can do this. You could do just muriatic. What you'll get is the bright silver from your polished steel, and the contrast will be a light to dark gray. And then everything is perfectly smooth. You can't feel any of the contrasting steels. Then you can take the option of, after you've neutralized it from being in the muriatic, you can then take it and put it in ferric very, 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 very quickly, a very short amount of time. And the ferric will start giving you the darker, blacker contrast. But it can start eating away very quickly, and you'll start feeling the topography of the different steels. And that's a pretty common way of doing it. The way that I do it now, I've learned a different way, is I take my muriatic acid when it's in the jar and I put a little bit of ferric into it, just enough to turn it a little bit yellow. You're not putting a lot in. You don't want it to be brown. A little bit yellow to a yellowish brown is fine. That way, the whole time that I'm etching this in the muriatic and it's doing its job, so is the ferric to bring out the contrast. And that's why I'm able to bring out a true silver and black contrast. Now, there's more that goes into it after the fact that I'm not going to bother discussing here, but there are certain ways to treat this. You don't just take it out of being neutralized and start wiping it down with Windex and shit. You have to take some very close care over the next day before this knife is finished. So here is the way that the Hellraiser fits in the hand. Nice full-size handle. You can choke up. Once again, I don't bring the edge all the way 100% back. I don't round it off like I do on the Scaphoid because I can't, because that's where the termination for the recurve is. So you really can't do that without really making that look like absolute shit. I then also round this edge off and this edge off, so that if you are bringing your finger back and forth, you're not coming across a harsh edge. I didn't used to do that. There used to be a very sharp edge there. I like that. Some people came back and said, I'd prefer if that was a little softer. So I have softened that just a little bit. There you can see where the plunges terminate. Edge going all the way back. You'll notice how thick I leave the top swedge. It's just there for decorative purposes. It's not meant to be a false edge. I have made one double-edged Hellraiser. I'm working on another one right now. I'll never do them again. Those were by special request from those customers. And this is one of only 3 Damasteel Hellraiser V2s that are in existence. And this will be the only one that will ever, ever, ever look like this. I will never use copper liners up against the Damasteel on a Hellraiser ever again. I want to keep this as unique as possible. There, if I put a shadow on the flat, you can see the grinds much more pronounced. Let's see if I can do the same here, can I? Yay, there we go. It's a little tricky with Damasteel, but there you go. You can see it there as well. I really, really did not enjoy making this particular knife, but it is one of my absolute favorites now that it's done. The Hellraiser, it was after I stopped using the names for bones, because I ran out of good sounding bone names. I am a horror movie and sci-fi geek. I absolutely love horror movies, Hellraiser being one of my favorites. So I decided to go with the Hellraiser moniker for this more aggressively designed knife with the recurve tanto with the harpoon. And I make an offshoot of this that is a double recurve tanto that's slimmer, where this is rounded downward, so it's almost you can't call it a drop point because it's a dual recurve double tanto, but it does slope downward, has a longer handle that comes up and out. It's arched in here, then it has a lanyard hole. I call that one the Hellbound because the sequel to Hellraiser was Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. So that's kind of an idea of how I design my knives, how I name them, some of the processes involved in how I made these two. I don't know if there's really anything else that someone might want to know. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to put them down in the remarks in the comments section down below. I'll do my best to answer them. I have done taper tang Hellraisers. I've done them with pins. I prefer to have the screws. Somebody once made the stupid challenge acting, just because I don't do something doesn't mean I can't. And they said, oh, well, he doesn't taper tangs and he uses this removable hardware instead of using traditional pins. Yeah, forgive me for using $12 pieces of hardware, so it's, $22 just to screw my knife together instead of what equates to about 30 cents, 80 cents worth of pin. I mean, come on. So as that comment came out on their Instagram, I took a Hellraiser I was working on and I tapered the tang, I used pins, did all that shit, and just went, okay, there you go. Now I'm going to go back to making knives how I want to make them. Just because somebody makes knives differently than other people doesn't mean that they're right or wrong, as long as they're fundamentally correct. The knife is sharp, it will actually cut. The bevels are done properly, the grinding is done properly, the work is done properly. It doesn't matter how they choose to put everything together. I like the removable hardware. I just had a customer recently that bought a Hellraiser from Fort Henry Custom Knives, and he's like, you know what, I love the knife, not crazy about the green scales that are on there. Can you make new scales? Sure, boom. Popped the old ones off, made him new scales, and a couple of days later, he got his knife back with carbon fiber scales. So it's something where I've made customers multiple sets of scales that they can change out for themselves. Just it's a nice feature. And I like to use premium materials for everything that I do. Because I'm going to be honest, I charge a premium price. I am not an inexpensive person to buy from. So you know that I don't cheap out on any of the materials. I don't cheap out on my time, the labor, the fit, the finish. I do the absolute best I can with the money that I'm charging. And to be fair, a lot of times I get pissed off when I see somebody charging a premium amount of money and they cut a corner and they cheap out somewhere. Maybe they're using a somewhat cheaper material somewhere. I'd rather use $12 pivots than, cheap little pins. Is it traditional? No, but I don't make traditional knives. It's not my style. I did it. I made a drop point hunter for one of my 4 presentation knives to get into the Knife Makers Guild because I wanted to show I can do things that are outside of my wheelhouse because I don't make traditional style knives. I have done more traditional things upon request, but if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I want you to make me X style of knife, and it's not something I want to do, then no, I'm not going to do it. My books are closed to the public. They have been closed for more than a year. What I do my best to do is I supply my dealer network. I have a long list of dealers I'm very, very proud to work with. Blade HQ, Fort Henry Custom Knives, just to name a couple of them. And what I attempt to do is make 1 or 2 knives a month available on my Instagram. I just go, hey, I just made this knife, or I'm about to finish this knife. Boom, it's going to be available and you can purchase it right now. Because I do want my customers to be able to access stuff from me directly every now and then. I can't accept orders. It's too, I got too inundated. I got in over my head and I was starting to blow timelines, and I don't want to do that. So that's kind of the story. I don't know if there's anything else that y'all really want to know or really want to see. I'm trying to give you of the best views that I know how. Let you see the finish and detail work. Let you see the mirror polishing. Again, to be properly done, Damasteel should be mirror polished. And by the way, what's funny is the richness in the lighter browns in this African blackwood didn't start to show themselves till about 12 or 1500 grit. It was kind of neat to see it happen. It didn't show up until I got a little bit finer. I was like, wow, this really has some depth and dimension to it. I've really only used this material a couple of times, The next few knives I'm going to be doing some koa, some desert ironwood, and I know how rich the desert ironwood can come out, but this one really surprised me. So yeah, I'm sad that I don't get to keep this one for myself and carry this one, but that just means I gotta make something else special. It won't be in Damasteel though. As you'll see, this is about 200 thousandths thick. It's a very thick stock. Nobody in the US, as far as Damasteel distributors, carries Damasteel that thick. I think the thickest I've seen, and that's still only a couple of pieces, is like 186 thou. So I had to order it directly from Pear, from Damasteel, directly in Sweden. They forged this billet for me, and I waited a couple weeks for them to make it and ship it. And I think I made 6 or 7 knives. It was a full meter of steel. And that is it. I do not have any more. Damasteel prices have gone up from distributors. It's much more expensive to get. And I can't always get the sizes that I need. So I'm only going to make 1 or 2 more right now in Damasteel from, I think, I just did a little finger, which I really should have kept. I'll make a video of that when it comes back from the sheath, because I did a rainbow style. So it has rainbow finishing throughout the Damasteel. I do want to show that to you. And I think I have 1 more that I'm making in Damasteel, and that's it. I'm going to go back to a little bit more of the Chad Nichols stainless Damascus. Just did some Mike Norris fire clone, loved that. And I like experimenting with different things all the time. So I'm going to keep on doing that. Try to make a few interesting pieces here and there. And unfortunately, since it really doesn't seem like there's going to be a blade show, you won't get to see the surprises I had planned. So I'll tell you this, follow my Instagram at Skelton Bladeworks, and you're going to see some announcements through the summer on flippers, on custom EDC flashlights of my design. A lot of interesting stuff that I'm very excited about. The Riat production tibia is going to be available. The custom knife factory little finger flipper. I'm working on an advanced tibia flipper that'll be a production knife as well. So yeah, definitely keep your eyes peeled on my Instagram. You'll see all those updates that you would have seen at Blade Show. Now, if they postpone it and then, you know, half the earth hasn't been called by then, I will hope to make whatever the postponed date is and bring some goodies out for that. So anyway, I'm going to end it here, guys. Thank you very much. For those that like the knives, thank you. For those that don't, it's not your taste. Hey, that's cool, man. I do everything. I do from user finishes that cost $475 all the way up into various Damascus, San Mai, and Damasteel, and all kinds of different stuff. I make different types of knives for different types of people. And this just happened to be a pair of really pretty, very showy knives, but they're Damasteel, so it doesn't hurt them to be used. They can certainly withstand it, and I do grind them with edges that are made for use. So you get lifetime free sharpening on all my knives, so use the shit out of them, man. Go for it. Beat the hell out of it. I'll always put a new edge on there for you. All right, I'm out of here, and I'll catch you guys in a few days on the next video.